Next up on Farm Truck Financial, you had a lot of questions from our first estate planning show. We're going to answer more of those questions today.
Welcome to Farm Truck Financial, where wisdom and wealth ride shotgun. Join Eric Kearney, president of Retirement Wealth Advisors, who believes that the best kind of planning happens when four tires hit the road. So hop in. Today, we're talking about investment strategies that drive results.
Farm Truck Financial, we're right.
The information shared in today's episode is for general educational purposes only. It's not legal advice and doesn't create an attorney-client relationship. Everyone's situation is different, so please consult a qualified Florida attorney for advice specific to your needs. Welcome back to Farm Truck Financial. My name is Eric Kearney, president of Retirement Wealth Advisors, and I am so happy to have Katharine back again. She is an estate planning attorney from Punta Gorda. Katharine, welcome back.
Thank you. I appreciate coming back.
You know, we had a lot of viewers watch your podcast and they're like, we have more questions. So I wanted to go over like misconceptions and questions that people have about estate planning. One of the biggest things is that Florida is a very transient state. People move in, people move out. Sometimes they move back again. Sometimes they move back out again. So it's like people are always coming and going, and they're getting wills and trusts done in other states. What happens if somebody had trust work or wills done in other states?
Mm-hmm. That is one of the most asked questions that I get. And the answer is it depends. So when you become a Florida resident, new laws apply to your situation. For example, when you move from a state such as Rhode Island or Massachusetts that has a separate state income tax, Florida doesn't have a separate state income tax. So that's an example of where the state laws differ. When it comes to estate planning, the state of your residence is the state that would otherwise have jurisdiction upon your death, such as whether or not probate laws are going to apply, whether or not the incapacity laws and the default laws are going to apply. So you want to make sure that your documents, that your will is compliant with Florida law, that your power of attorney is compliant with Florida law. Your advanced healthcare directives, as long as those were executed and valid in that sister state, Florida does have a statute that gives some reciprocity to giving validity to those advanced healthcare directives.
Is there a problem if somebody moves to another state and their stuff is not updated? That's how technical I get stuff.
There can be. So one of the gotchas in Florida is not just anybody can qualify to serve as a personal representative, what we call an executor. You have to be at least 18, no felony conviction. You have to be competent. Most recently, there was the addition for a good reason, no conviction of abuse of elderly or disabled adult. But if it's somebody that doesn't reside in Florida, so if it's a non-resident, then they have to be a blood relative. It's a consanguinity. That's the fancy word, the consanguinity requirement. So let's say your best friend, 30 years up in New York, and you really want him to serve as your executor, and he resides in New York, he wouldn't qualify in Florida.
Gotcha.
Because he doesn't reside here and he's not a relative.
And that's the crazy thing. Like, we have friends and we have people that take care of us, but are not going to be recognized, right? I mean, that's pretty much what the whole thing is. What about creditors and predators with estate planning? Like, how are we supposed to protect our assets? That's another huge question that we get.
It's huge. So we have some very powerful homestead laws. I went over those in the last episode. We also have laws that will protect certain joint accounts owned between husbands and wives, known as tenants by the entirety, against one spouse's creditor. That's a very powerful type of asset protection here in Florida. We also have special asset protection under our Chapter 222 for IRAs, for pensions, for annuities. So I think we have to look at the nature of the asset and how it's owned as far as tenants by the entirety is concerned. But then we also have some entity planning that we could do as well. Limited liability companies, corporations, things like that.
Okay, great. There are so many moving parts when it comes to estate planning, and a lot of times we don't even know what we need. So when we go go and we hire a qualified attorney, what we want to do is sit down and figure out what our actual needs are and then let the attorney really figure that out. So what are some other things that we have to be aware of when we come and see you?
So I think it's important to start thinking about things. Start putting a list of questions together. I even encourage my clients, put a list of your assets together. How the asset is legally titled, if it's just in your name and someone else's name, if it's owned in a trust, and is there a beneficiary designation in place? If you have a primary, maybe you don't or do or do not have a contingent beneficiary, but getting all that information together. And I even encourage people, see if you can get some type of confirmation from your financial institution, because you may think you've put somebody in place, but until you actually see it and confirm it, you don't really know 100%.
Right.
Something else to keep in mind is you really want to make sure that you have your idea of who you want to inherit, how you want them to inherit. So if you have minor children or grandchildren, if you have special needs beneficiaries, if you have a business and you have a very specific business succession plan in your mind, you want to make sure that that's in proper legal form.
Great. Thank you so much, Katharine.
You're welcome.
Stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to go through the top estate planning questions that Katharine gets asked. See you soon.
Do you have questions and concerns about your money, lifestyle, and retirement? Like so many, investors today worry about living expenses, healthcare costs, inflation, and stock market volatility. Instead of worrying, start planning. Eric Kearney and his team at Retirement Wealth Advisors want to sit down, get to know you, and start to build a plan that matches your vision and goals. Let's have a real conversation about what's important to you and how we get there. We'll help build you a plan based on your goals, lifestyle, and income needs, with financial clarity over complexity. Call us today for a farm fresh second opinion. Remember, you only retire once, so let's get it right the first time.
And next up on Farm Truck Financial, we are going to ask a couple questions to Katharine about what most people are asking. The first one I know is, do I have to put all my children's name on my assets to avoid probate? And this kind of gets messy, I would assume.
It does.
Yeah.
So really it stems from the idea of when you have a jointly owned asset with a right of survivorship, when one of the owners dies, that asset goes outright to the surviving owner. So it avoids probate. So a lot of people think, well, let me add my daughter, my son onto that account or onto my home, right, to avoid probate. But what they're not thinking about is what that does as far as a liability is created at that point. Because if that child gets sued, if that child goes through a divorce, if that child has any type of creditor, maybe the IRS, what happens is now your asset that you just added your child on thinking that you were going to avoid probate is now subject to attachment, whether it's in a lawsuit or as part of a divorce proceeding. So that's how people inadvertently end up losing their money, their home is foreclosed on, et cetera, when they have a joint owner that is not their spouse, because there's an exception for spouses, but like a child as a joint owner on that asset. So we got to be very careful with that.
So when it comes to like family, you have in-laws, you have outlaws and everything. And it's like, you want to know where your money's going, how it's going, all your assets are going, and you really don't want to share them with people that you don't want to share them with, right? And divorce is, let's face it, it's pretty common anymore. So we do have to be aware of that. And that's why I think that estate planning is ever evolving. You're going to make changes to it, right?
Yes.
A future full of unknowns is everyone's reality. So when we do estate planning, we want to think about, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying to protect? What are we trying to do? But then we also have to realize that things are going to change, whether we want them to or not. So I think that that's a great thing to bring up. The next thing is, aren't trusts just for like multi-millionaires, people with big money and big assets?
So I get a lot of questions about trust. Some people will come right out of the gate and say, I'm here because I want to trust. And we talk a little bit about what that means. So there are different types of trust, but I think for today's purposes, I'll just keep it very, very general. Think of two categories, revocable trust with an R, where you are in control, you can amend, you can revoke. Irrevocable with an I, once they're created, just like it sounds, you're not in control anymore.
Right.
So I'm really going to focus with the revocable trust because 99% of the time, that's what I'm talking with my clients about. And a revocable trust is really a contractual arrangement for how you want your assets to be managed, right? So just like if you had an LLC or a corporation and you're transferring property into that entity because you either want asset protection, probate avoidance, easy management. With a trust, it's a little bit different. So very important to know that in Florida, with a revocable trust, when you transfer assets into that type of trust, it doesn't give you any more asset protection than you had before, right?
Okay.
Because Florida doesn't have what's called a domestic asset protection trust. Some states do, Florida does not. So really important to remember with a revocable trust, if you can get to the asset, your creditors can. And again, your homestead's still protected. So there's some assets that are just naturally protected, whether they're in trust or not. But what we're doing is we're trying to take legal title out of our personal name and make sure that it's in the name of a trustee, right? And we can be our own trustee. We're our own beneficiary of the trust, maybe. We're our own trustee. And then upon our death, the contract terms, the trust terms, state what happens, right? It states who our backup trustee is, what the trustees to do, who our beneficiaries are. But what's key and why a trust can avoid probate of assets is that it allows you to retitle assets out of your personal name. And in our last podcast, we talked about the need for probate, right? When a person owns an asset in his or her sole individual name without a beneficiary. So a trust is just another tool in the toolbox that we can retitle our assets into the trust, and we're still in control.
Yeah.
But at our death, the trust allows probate avoidance. So I would say it's not just for the multi-millionaires. It's for folks that just have assets, right? If you have a homestead, if you have an investment property, it would be worth looking into and discussing with a qualified Florida attorney whether or not it's appropriate for you.
Right. So many moving parts.
Yes. Yes, there are.
So again, this is why we put everybody through a process: financial plan, income plan, tax plan, wealth management, concierge service. But people are looking for that financial infrastructure. Really, the next step after that is estate planning. So this is why I'm so grateful to have Katharine on today. Stay tuned. We got one more segment with Katharine. I'm so grateful she's here. We'll see you soon.
You know who has one of the toughest retirements? Procrastinators. You keep telling yourself, yeah, I'm going to get to that. But after months turn into years, you realize that time is one investment you can't buy back. The earlier you start, the longer your money works for you. Stop letting someday steal your future. The best time to start was yesterday. The next best time is right now. Don't let procrastination be the reason you work longer and retire smaller. Call us today for a complimentary review of your finances. And remember, you only retire once. So let's get it right the first time.
And we are back on Farm Truck Financial. And Katharine, I do have one question. What is the difference between a living will and a do-not-resuscitate?
Very good question. So a living will is a document. It's an advanced healthcare directive that states that a person does not wish to be kept alive artificially. And the way that our living will statute reads here in Florida, if you are not competent and you are being kept alive by artificial means, and if you have one of three types of conditions, a terminal condition, irreversible end stage, or a persistent vegetative state, a coma, and if two physicians have examined you and they agree it's beyond a reasonable medical probability that you're going to regain your capacity, the living will states, I don't want to be kept alive under those conditions.
Oh, okay.
So it's a person that is already being kept alive artificially. It's the withdrawal of those artificial means to allow them to pass away naturally. A do not resuscitate is an order, and it can only be given by a medical doctor. So, and I'm not a doctor. Too much education. Law school is enough. So, but a medical doctor can give a do not resuscitate. But an example of that would be if somebody goes into cardiac arrest, if there is a DNR posted, usually it's a very brightly colored piece of paper on a refrigerator in someone's home. If the paramedics come, they're not even supposed to apply CPR, even if that person could come back and could live, a very long life afterwards. DNR is don't even apply the resuscitation.
wow.
So very different documents.
Wow. See, that's crazy. So, I mean, this is so informative, especially as we get older. And this is really what we have to do before we become incapacitated. These are difficult decisions that we have to make. The other question that I get a lot of thought on is, what happens to my home if I go into a nursing home or assisted living?
Yes. Oh, I get that question a lot, with good reason. We are living longer and longer, and healthcare costs are rising. And unfortunately, by the time many people start thinking about long-term care coverage, it's too late, right? Or it's cost prohibitive. So I want you to keep in mind that our homestead, as long as we pay any mortgage that encumbers it, as long as we pay our taxes, as long as we pay any contractors that perform work on the home, no one else can lien our home. So our home is protected. And that means that not even a nursing home could lien our home. So a lot of folks are worried about, will the nursing home, the assisted living facility, take my home in Florida? And the answer is no, they can't legally take it. However, practically speaking, they want to know, how are you going to pay to stay in that facility, right? So in order to go into the facility, you're probably going to have to give information regarding your ability to pay, your finances. And you may be able to assign over pensions and Social Security, but what other liquid assets do you have? So a lot of folks will make that decision, you know what, I can sell my home in order to convert that into the cash that I need to pay for my care. So that's really kind of breaking down why folks do end up selling their home. There are avenues in order to preserve the home and qualify for government assistance. That's more Medicaid planning. And there are some excellent board certified Medicaid elder law attorneys out there. I don't practice that particular area of the law, but there are different plans that can be put in place if it gets to a point where a person truly just does not have the ability to pay for their care.
Right. And this is really something that we need to put in place way before we actually need it. So again, estate planning is something that we really can't procrastinate on, because again, it's not like you're putting everything, nothing is written in stone, right? You're trying to make options for yourself in case you do get sick or a loved one gets sick. You want to figure out how you actually are going to pay for that while protecting whatever assets you might be able to do. There's a lot of people who think, well, my kids know who's going to get what, so why do I have to do all this estate planning stuff? It seems like a big process. They know what jewelry they're going to get. They know what bank accounts they're going to get. So why do I have to do all this stuff?
So I would say that it's worth it. It's worth it for your loved ones, for family harmony, to put things in place and to put it in writing. Because the last thing that you want is when you pass away for your beneficiaries, whether your children or someone else, to fight, right? You want it very clear. And also, it's important, and I've had this happen a lot more than you would think. After a person passes and I'm meeting with the loved one, they say, well, mom told me I was always supposed to get the house, or dad told me I was supposed to get the car. He verbally told me, but it wasn't in writing. So what the person may have thought and wanted to happen towards the end of their life, unless they take action and actually put it in the documents, it's not legal.
Right. So a lot of times estate planning can speak for you when you are no longer able to speak for yourself. So again, if you guys have any questions, contact Katharine below if you have any questions about estate planning. And Katharine, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for
always
having
appreciate
me.
seeing you.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Everybody out there, thanks for joining us on Farm Truck Financial. We will see you on the back roads of retirement.
Out with
Thanks for riding along with us today. We hope you got some good dirt. If you liked today's show, subscribe, like, and share with all your farm truck friends. We hope you'll join us for the next ride on Farm Truck Financial, where we're always planting seeds for a better future, 1 mile, $1 at a time.
Farm Truck Financial, we're riding with you down the back road steady.